Hello, everyone, and very warm welcome to our Friday edition of Team Coaching Circle. It's great to see you all joining in, some of those familiar faces, and some of you who are newly joining Team Coaching community. We are celebrating International Coaching Week together with ICF Ireland chapter. So this is one of the events from the series. And for those who are newer to Team Coaching Circle space, I just wanted to very briefly share what is it all about. So Team Coaching Circle is a professional learning community for team coaches, leadership development practitioners, HR professionals, organizational consultants, while we're exploring this evolving edge of team coaching practice together. My name is Agla Holton. I'm team coaching practitioner and leadership coach myself, and I'll be hosting a conversation today. As I mentioned, the session closes and is part of our International Coaching Week series. It's the last one this week, and I honestly can't think of a more important conversation to finish well with. So today we are exploring neurodiversity in team coaching. And now, one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this topic into Team Coaching Circle community is because neurodiversity is already present in pretty much every team we coach, whether it's been disclosed or not, recognized or not. And conservative estimates suggest that around 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and other forms of cognitive difference already exist in every organization and often very strongly within leadership, innovation, entrepreneurial, and creative environments. And yet many coaches, including myself, honestly speaking, were never formally trained to think about what it means in practice. So today's session invites us all not only to into greater awareness, but into reflection about ethical and practical responsibilities we hold as coaches working with teams and systems. And I'm truly delighted that we have someone joining us today who brings both professional expertise and lived experience into this conversation. So I'm genuinely pleased to welcome Hannah Linehan. Hi, Hannah.
Thank you so much. I've been busy pressing the admit button in the background for you, Hegla, and it's great to see so many faces joining. You might just pop into the chat where you're joining from, so to give us an idea, as it says International Coaching Week, and you're all very welcome.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And just by the way of introduction, let me share a few words about you and your experience. So Hannah is a neuroscience-based and ICF certified coach, neurodiversity specialist, and founder, president of Institute of Neurodiversity Ireland. Hannah works with neurodivergent professionals, founders, CEOs, innovators, creatives, and supports both individuals and organizations to create those environments where different ways of thinking are recognized as strengths rather than problems to be solved. So, Hannah, wonderful to have you with us. And I think that we're landing quite well into this space. So that's really good timing to hand over to you.
Thank you so much. We're safely in Egle's hands, and Egle is going to watch the chat for me and interrupt if there's anything that pops up. And you're all very welcome. Just as a by note, I'm neurodivergent myself, late life diagnosed, and I have ADHD, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. And I score highly for a lot of the autism traits, just not been assessed for them. I hope you're going to enjoy the chat. We're going to have one breakout room during it and some feedback. And there's a chance to ask loads of questions at the end. But it is a very condensed version of what is a massive conversation. So I hope it's a good introduction for you. I'm just going to go ahead and try and share my slides here. And just want to check that you can see them all. A couple of nods, maybe. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. So essentially coming from a team coaching perspective, but this conversation is relevant to all coaches in the room. And to consider that we need to be coaching for every brain in the room with us. So most coaching rewards one type of brain. And It's one type of attention style, one type of communication or processing style. And just in terms of what you may see in the coaching space when neurodivergence is present, you might see a bit of disengagement. It might look like resistance or a poor attitude, disorganization. But there's a lot of other things going on for a person who is neurodivergent. And I'm going to go through the traits, the language. I'm going to have a bit of a discussion about what you might change in your practices. But what sometimes happens is the person might be having regulation challenges, processing differences, communication challenges, or a sensory overload, like what was happening to me yesterday at an in-person event. I just had sensory overload and was totally spent at the end of the day. We're all different. In your organizations, around you, your families, your friend networks, you have a huge amount of difference everywhere around you. We're going to talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And neurodiversity, if you think of biodiversity, it's the natural variation across humanity. These are two words that everybody gets mixed up. So please, there's no shaming here in terms of if you've made the mistakes anywhere recently or in the past, it's absolutely okay. But neurodiversity is all of us, all of humanity. We have differences in how our brains work. Neurodivergence is when the person's cognitive processing or the way their brain works deviates significantly from the dominant social and environment. So there's just, you're dominating enough from, or you're diverging enough from what is the dominant expectation. As Egley pointed out there is a stat. It comes from Nancy Doyle, eminent in the neurodivergent space, and she did her thesis in the late 1990s about neurodivergence, and she had a huge amount of research and said that 1 in 5 people realistically in the population are neurodivergent. That does not mean that 1 in 5 people in the workplace are neurodivergent, and that is really down to exclusion factors, difficulty maybe in accessing the job market, but you can safely assume that that stat is very much on the low side. So it's not a niche, it's everywhere. And this is thanks to AI helping me with my graphics. This is a version of the conversation out there, because what actually falls under neurodiversity, it's broader than you may have thought. So a lot of people just think maybe it's just autism and ADHD. Yes, it's dyslexia that I have, it's dyscalculia, it's dyspraxia, but it's also things like acquired brain injury or traumatic brain injury, could be epilepsy or bipolar. It is huge. And this list is very much on the non-exhaustive side. There's a lot more there, but it's just to give you a sample for the breadth of neurodivergence. So a little bit about the language, and I just want to point out that there are a few phrases that can do quite a lot of harm that we might not notice we could be using. So things like, it's common to say, and I've heard it from plenty of people, oh, we're all a little bit ADHD, or everyone struggles to focus. There's phrases like that that can be said without any malice or intent, but can be quite harmful to the neurodivergent community. I would explain it quite simply as there's a lot of the traits that show up that are common to neurotypical and neurodivergent people, like the inability to focus sometimes. But if the traits were so severe and so interruptive of your daily life, you would go and see a doctor. And that's really the difference. It's the intensity, it's the frequency of the traits that make it difficult. And it's what gives you a neurodivergent diagnosis. So something to consider, questions that might support. What support helps you process clearly? So in a coaching environment, particularly a team coaching environment, consider these as sort of a place to start. How best do you receive information? What environment helps you participate? Not everybody participates the same way, and we will have a look at that. If you're unsure, please ask. There is a lovely phrase in the neurodivergent community, nothing about us without us. And that really speaks to, if you don't know, just ask the person, how would they like to be talked about, and what terminology would they like to use? Some people use person first terminology, and some people use diagnosis first terminology. And that would be like me describing myself in two ways. One saying, I'm a neurodivergent female, or I'm a female with neurodivergence, say ADHD or dyslexia. That is a preference. There is no right or wrong either way. But please stop using disorders, illness, symptoms, describing something as high functioning. Go for instead neurodivergence traits or low support needs, etc. Egli, I see you have your hand raised there.
Yeah, just kind of as we're mapping the territory, I just wanted to bring in Alessandro's question. He
Brilliant.
just pinged in the chat. He is asking, is alexithymia a form of neurodivergence?
Yes. I can't tell you more about it than that because I'm not well skilled in it. But yes, it would fall under the broadest umbrella of neurodivergence for sure. And thank you so much for asking that. And so like misophonia and a lot of other conditions that you would think would be smaller, they are all under the neurodivergence umbrella. Yeah, good question. In terms of saying the word normal, try neuronormative, but that's quite a big word. So I sometimes just say like dominant standards or maybe just human. Keep it nice and simple. We don't talk about deficits. We talk about differences because a neurodivergent person is not broken or less than. They just have what I describe as a slightly different operating system in their head. And it's really understanding how to get the best out of that operating system. And we don't talk about comorbidity when two conditions show up. We talk about co-occurring or coexisting. Just in case anyone's asking in the chat, yes, this is being recorded, and yes, you may have the slides afterwards. So no need to frantically write. I usually, if I'm doing a keynote, I don't put very many words on the slide, but I appreciate we have an audience from all over the world today, and some people may want to have takeaways from this. So that's the reason. It's text heavy, I'm afraid. So there's something that comes up called the double empathy problem. And really it stems from conversations criticizing neurodivergent people for being communications poor or being just a problem in a communications context. Really, it's not the neurodivergent person's fault. The issue comes up, and this is the double empathy problem, is there's norms and expectations on both sides. So I listed some of, just to give you ideas, some neurotypical norms and expectations in a communication session would be like, you start with small talk in a session. That's not always an expectation of, say, somebody with autism. They go straight in. Verbal communication is seen as the default. Maybe somebody might have a preference for written communication. So you're getting the idea that there is a lot of norms and expectations in a communication setting that will be predominantly neurotypical. And that can cause a clash when the expectation might be slightly different from a neurodivergent person. How it shows up. Now, what I've tried to do is help in terms of the traits. The traits are many, they're varied, and they don't always show up the same way for somebody with the same condition. So both myself and my partner have ADHD, but our traits are very different. They show up differently. So I'm trying to make this easy by clustering them into attention and executive function, into processing and communication, and under sensory and emotional regulation, just to help you understand where some of the traits might be. So under attention and executive function, like not all people can start a task on demand, even a boring one. But for many neurodivergent people, their brain is working slightly differently, and the trigger needs to be interest, urgency, or novelty. So it's not a lack of capability or effort for getting a task started or for doing something. It's literally that the dopamine that neurotypical people have for that initiation is deregulated. So it cuts both ways. The same brain that can't start the task, if it's a low interest task, might lock in and be extraordinary at hyper focus when something actually clicks. I'm not sure if somebody's trying to get my attention with the squiggle on the screen. If Egley might interrupt if there's anything that needs to, no, you're getting shake. Okay, perfect, I'll keep going. So think of executive function as like the brain's project manager, and it's handling time and planning and prioritization and sequencing. But in the neurodivergent brain, that project manager is working on a slightly different system. So it can look like it missed steps or it's inconsistent with the output, but it's just the same system that struggles with routine and admin. It can be completely exceptional in a crisis. So if something goes really wrong, it's a neurodivergent person you really want in the middle of things, and phenomenal at creative problem solving. So some of those strengths that would fall into sort of the attention and executive function area would be things like creative thinking, hyper-focus, rapid idea generation, and innovative problem solving. They can be absolutely phenomenal at that. Under processing communication, essentially a neurodivergent brain can be taking in and connecting more information than you would think. So it all from every aspect, all of this information is going in and they're trying to process it, but it doesn't get processed in a linear fashion like a neurotypical brain would do. So sometimes when they're pausing before answering, often it's deep processing, not disengagement. So please don't take it personally. And especially under pressure, translating complex internal thinking into spoken words can take a little more effort or more time. But if you flip that, a neurodivergent person can have hugely strong skills in pattern recognition, systems thinking, and deep insight, and come up with really original perspectives because they're having so much more insights and information in their system. On sensory and emotional regulation, your nervous system, for a neurodivergent person, I always say your nervous system's not broken, even though we've often been told our nervous systems are faulty or broken. It's just that we don't have the same filters. So it's a filtering problem. Sensory and emotional and social inputs come in louder, and there is not the filtering that you had turn down the volume that you would for a neurotypical person. That's why I say environments and interactions that feel fine to other people can be genuinely overwhelming to a neurodivergent person. But the flip side of that is that that same sensitivity can drive really, really deep, sort of strong intuition and high empathy, the nuanced awarenesses, and that really deep commitment and care, all of those beautiful things that you would want from a good coaching experience. I know I've definitely been told I'm too sensitive over the years. And before I knew about my neurodivergent diagnosis, I would have said, well, a big heart has big emotions. And that was kind of my way of fobbing it off. But essentially, it was just like I didn't have a way of filtering all of that stuff that was coming into me. And I put down there just a sensitivity. That's really something that is hard for neurodivergent people to name, but it's that sense of wanting the world to be fair. And we can often lock on to that. So sometimes people who are advocates are really good in that space because they can have the hyper focus and lock on to the task, but also that justice sensitivity that they really want the world to be righted of any unfairness. In terms of your team coaching sessions, and just put these up in terms of what you might see in the room, but please don't take offense because that might not be what's actually happening. So this lack of timekeeping and people being late, I mean, you have a team coaching session, you have a break, and then somebody like me wanders in 5 minutes late from the break. It's not disrespect. It's a thing called time agnosia, which is shorthand time blindness. And it's literally the brain does not feel or experience time in the same way that a neurotypical person does. So when I feel 5 minutes feels like it doesn't feel the same as it does for you. Interrupting, that can be a double-edged sword for neurodivergent people. Some neurodivergent people can't stand being interrupted because they'll lose their train of thought, but they will interrupt because they'll also lose their train of thought. And it's to do with a challenge with being able to use your working memory. So your working memory is that piece that holds on to the information you need to access in the moment. So say, for example, somebody gives you instructions. If somebody gives me directions from here to somewhere else, by the time they've got to the second piece of turn left and go past the bend in the road, I've already forgotten the first line in the instruction because that working memory piece isn't great. How that might show up in your team coaching sessions is if you are asking people to learn off a script, for example, that's going to be highly challenging for some neurodivergent brains. I'm not going to read through all the list there, but I'll pick one in terms of over-explaining. A lot of neurodivergent people might be criticized for over-explaining, over-talking something, which I might do in this presentation. Hopefully not, or Egley will cut me off if we're over time. But it's the anxiety about being misunderstood. So we tend to over-explain and keep talking. The person says, yeah, I got it, relax. And we just seem like we're talking ourselves around and around and around. And some of these you will see from some people. But I'm going to come back to masking later before anybody puts it into the chat. Masking can be massive for people in a neurodivergent setting. Egley, you have your hand up. Please come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to voice one of the questions which is
Brilliant,
came
thank
up
you.
in the chat. And Alessandro, do you mind just unmute yourself and kind of share the question loud?
Please do.
Absolutely, thank you, Egle, and thank you, Anna. Anna, I'm wondering, going through and listening to the challenges that a coach dealing with a team, including neurodivergent people, how would you recommend to adjust the ICF competencies, for instance, to be more sensitive when you know that there are traits of neurodivergent perspective?
Yeah, Alessandro, thank you so much. It's something that really does need to be addressed. But I think even taking a step before that, if you look at the courses people do for their primary education into the ACC, obviously that's the ICF route. I know we'll have some EMCC coaches joining our call, but whatever you do as your primary education to be a coach, that doesn't touch any neurodivergence. Doesn't it? Like, so if you think even without the core competencies, we're not even being educated, we're not being made aware. And this isn't in order to be able to diagnose in the room. This is just to create a better room for everybody. So I will be talking about adjustments, and we're going to look at that. And that's also part of the breakout room exercise you'll be doing. But really, it comes back to that. We need to start at a place where we're building up the awareness, the understanding, so that we are better coaches for everybody. We also end up being better human beings and better family members and friends, etc. But yeah, they do need to start at the start, and that's in the primary steps of the coaching journey for education, for sure. Does that answer your question, Alessandro?
Thank you, Anna. Absolutely. Thank
you.
You.
Welcome. Masking, I mentioned. Thanks again to AI for my graphics. I put a whole slide for masking because very often people will say, oh, but somebody told me they are ADHD or bipolar or they've dyslexia, but I never see it. You know, I'm aware of all these traits, but sure, they don't have that. They couldn't possibly. It's probably because that person is masking. And masking is that effort to hide all of the traits that you might have in order to fit in. And it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting, and it's invisible. You don't see what people are doing it because they're masking. They're pretending to do all the things that you think they should be doing in order to be, quote unquote, and I hate the word normal. And it's very time consuming. It does take extra, like time effort, emotional effort, physical effort, everything in order to do it. And it's deeply unfair. There's adjusted sensitivity. I wish we didn't have to mask, but as most people will know, the world was designed and the rules were written by and for a white, cis male man, right-handed, neurotypical, all of those things, but that's not the world that we live in. So, I mean, I was diagnosed with anxiety early on, but it was just heavy levels of masking. So a lot of people will do it, and it is very tiring. And people, neurotypical people, will also mask for their own reasons. It could be because of stress, could be because of something's going on in their family. So being aware that people show up in front of you is not necessarily everything that's going on for them, and coaches will be all too familiar with that. I'm going to tell you a little coaching story, and this is a heads up because it is before a breakout room. And I'm telling you this story for a little bit of context. And it came up because, and this is obviously another AI graphic. I don't know who Alex is, but we're going to talk about Alex. As an example, a client of mine experienced team coaching. He's a member of an SLT team, and he came to me afterwards. He's neurotypical. We're going to, for the purposes of this, call him Alex. So Alex is a chief innovation officer, and he is neurodivergent, highly successful. He's the person the company would rely on to see what's coming, trends, before anyone else does. His combination of ADHD and dyslexia gave him the pattern recognition to see trends in the global markets years in advance of anybody else. So he's also got non-linear and big picture thinking and creative problem solving, particularly under pressure. So you can imagine in his capacity as a chief innovation officer, these are highly valuable skills to have. And he has saved the firm millions and generated phenomenal growth. So you're thinking, absolutely fantastic. This guy is a legend. He goes along to the senior leadership team session. They had an offsite, and in this SLT meeting, there was a team coaching session as part of it. It was organized, and it was with a team and performance coach. Okay, a really good team and performance coach. They were brought in as part of the offsite day, and this coach is fantastic, very good at what they do. However, no agenda was shared in advance. The coach's intention behind this was to keep it really open and emergent. But Alex was arriving into the start of the session, already his brain was working harder than everybody else in the room because he'd no map of what's about to come up. The session opened, he told me, with a round robin discussion. So the coach, team coach, posed a complex question because they're still talking about strategy. And he asked each person in turn around the table. They gave their feedback and their input. And the coach wanted to energize. So this was very fast paced. This was very quick fire, but there was no thinking time. And Alex, who processes deeply before he speaks, watched his turn come around the table before he was ready. And he goes to say something, but it doesn't really reflect his actual thinking. Okay. Midway during the session, the coach is live scribing, you know, when they use the digital whiteboards in the session. And he's live scribing all of the team's strategy priorities on this screen. So again, this is fast, it's fluid. There's typos being corrected on the fly as they're going. And at one point, the coach turns around and says, you know, Alex, does that capture what you said? And he's still trying to decode the line before it. He's just playing catch up. And he says yes, but he doesn't really mean yes because he's embarrassed. By the second hour, Alex hasn't had a break, and he's spending a huge amount of energy managing how he's coming across and how he's appearing in front of his colleagues. And he's spending more of this energy on that rather than contributing what he actually knows. He looks perfectly composed, but he's not. The session ends and the coach feels it went well. Everybody around the table, apart from Alex, really energized. Alex feels like he's failed. He's the company's most creative thinker, and he left the room feeling like he hadn't contributed any creativity whatsoever. So nothing actually went wrong. No one was unkind. The session just was designed for one type of brain, and that wasn't Alex's. So keep that in mind as kind of like, that's how it can be experienced. And we're thinking about team coaching. So Egle's going to help me here in a moment by putting you into groups. But the exercise really is in your breakout groups to think about designing for every brain in the room. If you were a team coach planning a session, how would you make it more neuro-inclusive with what you know at this time? There is absolutely no criticism here. This is just to try and get some ideas going. So Egle, how much time do you think we would have for the breakout rooms?
My suggestion would be we can allow 15 minutes. We're doing
Perfect.
very well in time.
That's great.
So just to kind of a bit more in-depth conversations.
Super. So if you start in your breakout rooms, give a quick introduction as to who is there, maybe if you have been team coaching before, this is so appropriate also to one-to-one coaching, because you show up as a one-to-one coach, you're going to have to also consider how neuro-inclusive your coaching practice is. So even if you've never team coached before and you're doing all one-to-one coaching, this is still for you as well. So please just consider that. Give a brief introduction, say who you are, maybe where in the world you're dialing in from, and your coaching input, and then a beautiful discussion, and come back and share if that would be all right. Happy to unmute yourselves.
I'm happy to go, Hannah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Anne.
I was in a room with Juta and I can't remember the name of the other girl. I'm so sorry. We were
That's
Mexico and Frankfurt and Dublin all in the room. So it was really nice to meet other people. We thought maybe if an agenda was sent out before the session detailing, what was going to happen, and maybe some thinking time to have been done beforehand, talking about what they were going to discuss might have just helped a little bit. We talked a little bit about how it's very new, and as coaches, sometimes it's quite difficult to understand how you might approach it. We wondered whether it's appropriate to ask a question if anybody has any special assistance needs in the room, and whether a neurodivergent would come up, or whether that's even appropriate to do. And then as coaches, maybe being self-aware and active listening, that while he might have seemed calm in the room, maybe if we were very aware or actively listening, we could see that he might have felt a bit uncomfortable, and maybe at the break approached him to see was everything okay with the way we were running the session, and was there anything that we could do differently. And yeah, we had a good discussion about it.
Wow,
I hope I represented the room okay.
Yeah, that's a rich discussion. All right, thank you so much, Anne. Would anybody else like to share?
Hannah, can I ask a question? I'm happy to share, but I also have a question.
Absolutely, Nicole. Thank you.
So we were talking the same, in terms of preparation to understand better the team, and whether there's anything we should be aware of as well in terms of how people learn and or learn best, and then kind of take that into consideration. So as Anne said, you might share with the individual the agenda or the exercise up front, so they have more time to think about. The question I was wondering is, when you try, is it enough to ask a team, how do you learn best? So actually it feels quite inclusive, so everyone can actually contribute, or do you think you have to be more specific about, in terms of neurodivergent individuals on the team? So I just wondered whether, it's enough to say how does everyone learn best, so you're aware of, or you have to be more specific?
Nicole, I love that. And it's slightly turn it on its head, but it's a beautiful question. So essentially, if your starting place is trying to be more neuro-inclusive, you are going to create a more inclusive space for everybody. That is to say, if I gave the example yesterday of, if I was to put up a picture of a woman, imagine she's sitting on a train and she's kind of against the window and she's just looking out, and you happen to be sitting opposite her on the train. You have absolutely no idea what's going on inside that woman's head. You can't make any assumptions. She could be worried about childcare. She could be trying to heavily process some sort of emotional distress. It could be absolutely anything. So it's the same in our coaching environments. We don't know, we have absolutely no idea the context that people are bringing to us, and we don't know what environment they process, how their system works. They might not even know if they're neurodivergent. I was blissfully unaware until I was 40. So like, some of us come quite late to the party. But I say, if we start with the understanding that not everybody thinks the same way, that not everybody experiences the world in the same way, and that not everybody has the same context, without it being specific to neurodivergence, we are creating a much more beautiful space for everybody. It just happens that if you're in a work environment, and a lot of coaches in this space here today will be going into workplaces of some form or another, that we are wanting to improve people's performance, people's experience, people's mental health. And part of that is creating better environments. We just happen to create better environments for everyone when we start being more neuro-inclusive. So thank you, Nicole, for allowing me to have that little rant. Anybody else like to share?
I can share.
Lovely, thanks, Colette.
I was in a group with 5 people. So we were all over the world, and kind of everybody brought like a different idea. So just trying to capture some of them. The point about sending around an agenda and getting clear on the purpose of the meeting felt really good. Also, potentially, if the team know each other, they might already have ideas of how they like to work if they are a fully formed team. So you could gather that information beforehand. Also, the possibility of, as you say, some people might not even know that they're neurodivergent. So the question of, are you, they might just kind of go, I don't know, haven't even thought about it. So instead of running a session in only one way, which is quick fire, round and round, round and round, vary it into maybe quiet 2 or 3 minutes to come up with an idea, maybe discuss with a pair, discuss with a larger group. And then there was one person who even had an idea potentially around using music in a session to break up little breaks. So yeah, we had lots of popcorn ideas of how to make it more inclusive by just bringing more variety and understanding the purpose of the meeting.
Absolutely fantastic. I think I'm going to go back and share because I have a couple of suggestions for you. So can you confirm if you can see my screen? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm not going to read through them all because you are getting these as takeaways, but I'm just suggesting a couple of small adjustments that these will make a difference for everybody in the rooms that you are in, be that in a coaching room or your kitchen at home. So some of them obviously are specific to team coaching practices, like sharing structures and expectations in advance. That's really about managing expectations. So if you're running a practice and it's online, are people going to have to turn the cameras on? If it's in person, where's the room? How big is it? Will there be breaks? It's just thinking of things that people will have asked questions, answer them before they ask. Because some people will never ask, but they're processing that stress internally. Give the written and verbal instructions. So giving instructions in 2 ways. Some people process the information verbally and some people it's written, so just the different forms. A predictable structure. Don't have absolute chaos going on, but I'm sure as team coaches, none of you would do that in the room. Reduced ambiguity. That's a big one for people. If you think about the person is using capacity in their brain to try and guess what possibly could come up, they could be using that capacity for self-improvement or for participating in the activities. And then looking at sensory awareness, light, temperature, sensitivity, proximity to other people. Do they have somewhere to put their things? A desk, if you're asking them to write, don't ask them to write in their lap. These are all things that are best for everybody, not just somebody who's neurodivergent. That's what I'm trying to communicate. If you just take one thing away from today, making small adjustments for the neurodivergent community is making it a better place for everyone. And as Colette mentioned there, varying the participation and the contribution styles as well in the different formats. So awareness is good, but you can still do some harm. So a lot of people ask me, where am I at and where do I need to be? So the way I'd explain it is a lot of people are just neuro-aware. That's the place to start. Knowing the basics, using respectful language, and not pathologizing. That's using the medical model of somebody being broken and needing to be fixed. If you step up a level, you're going neuro-informed. And that's really where you understand neurodivergence and how people participate, communicate, and process information. And you're adjusting your coaching accordingly. And when you get to the stage where it's a neurodiversity specialist, you're coming from a place with the lived experience. You've got deep experience supporting neurodivergent individuals, teams, and organizations on neurodiverse issues. So, not every coach needs to be a neurodiversity specialist, but every coach should be neuro-informed. So that's the difference. Like, are you dealing with people who are coming to you for neurodivergence issues? Maybe not. So you don't need to be a neurodiversity specialist, but you should be neuro-informed to create a much better place for everybody. I hope that helps. And then just some considerations. Please, instead of trying to diagnose people and going and hunting for diagnosis, which is a human temptation once you have a small bit of information in your system, please try not to. Just assume that there's going to be variability in every room that you're in, and stay curious about what is underneath that. Don't force anyone to make a disclosure. They might not know and they might not want to. And make support available without requiring someone to disclose or label what's going on for them. And the one word I usually put up is grace. Grace, both for the people to make mistakes and to learn, but also to be able to step into that space. It has to be a warm and welcoming environment. So grace, both from the neurodivergent perspective and from a neurotypical one. And look, it benefits across individuals, teams, and coaches themselves. You as a coach, you'll be stronger in the outcomes you achieve. You'll get deeper trust and just be a better coach if you're considering more neuro-inclusive approaches. And just a final thought, the future of effective team coaching is not learning how to coach neurodivergent people separately. It's learning how to create environments where all minds can be at their best. So I'll leave that up. I am very keen for anyone who wants to continue the conversation to get in touch with me in whatever format that works best for you. I put up my website there. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I am not so active on Instagram, as I only joined it as a newbie a few months ago, but I'm trying to get better at it. So if you wanted to go for it, follow along. But at this stage, I'm going to hand it over to Egle if there's any questions coming from the room.
Anna, so thank you so much for joining us and sharing such a grounded, thoughtful, and lived experience with all of us. I'm mindful that there are some other questions coming in, but we're kind of approaching the time boundary. I think that what would be really relevant is Michelle is asking where we can be taught by Hannah, how we can learn from you more. So maybe you would like to share a little bit more what you're planning in terms of
thank you, and thanks for teeing up that question. I'm actually developing a course that I'm launching later in the year specifically for coaches. So if anybody is interested in getting the heads up on that and a first shoe in the door, just follow me on LinkedIn. I will be posting about it, or pop me an email and I'll keep you informed. Whatever mode of communication you find best, that's the way to reach out to me, and I'll keep you in the loop because it will be a course specific for coaches on all neurodivergence.